distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Mr. Aaron Puri, Editor-in-Chief, and the India Today Group for kindly asking me to introduce Mr. Mandela to this august audience before we play his pre-recorded message to India Today Conclave 2006. I feel extremely honored and humbled. But let me say from the onset that I'm going to do a major injustice here today. To introduce, in a short time of approximately 12 minutes, an incredible human being who, quite frankly, needs no introduction. To say something about a phenomenal man whose very life and work speak more than any words can tell. In introducing Mr. Mandela to you, I thought I should refer to what his comrades and friends and others have said about this great son of Africa and a towering citizen of the world. Children are Mr. Mandela's biggest fans. And let me tell you a story, and this is a true story. When my niece, Zimasa, was 3 years old, she came home one afternoon from kindergarten and she asked my wife, "Sissy, what is Mandela's other name?" "He is Nelson," Sissy replied. "No, not that one," Zimasa responded. "Oh, okay. He is Rolihlahla," Sissy explained. Zimasa had not heard of that name, for she retorted with a tiny frown on her forehead, "Holy who? No, not that name," she complained. Sissy was now getting a little bit confused, but remembered another name, another famous name by which Mandela is affectionately called. "Okay," she said, getting ready to deliver the final blow. "He is Madiba." Zimasa was not persuaded, for she quickly brushed that name aside. "No, not that one." At this time, Sissy did not know what to say. What could Mandela's other name be, she wondered. She quickly jogged her history memory and looked down the corridors of history, and picking the 3-year-old girl up, Sissy said, "Well, you know, when Nelson Mandela was running away and hiding from the police many years ago, he had to assume disguises, travel around the country secretly, find places to live that were not likely to be under surveillance. The government called him the Black Pimpernel. And one day, he was disguised as a passenger in a chauffeur-driven car, and he identified himself to the arresting policeman as David Motsamai. And in prison, he was prisoner number 46664. Zimasa listened to all this historical account and was not impressed. "No," she shook her head, "not those names, the other one." At this, Sissy had run out of options. She looked at Zimasa with some curiosity and said, "Okay, you tell me now, young lady, what is Mandela's other name?" With all the confidence she could muster, the 3-year-old toddler replied, "His other name is Viva." Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born in Umtata, Transkei, South Africa on 18 July 1918. And in cricket terms, he is 88 not out. A lawyer by profession, and as he refers to himself, a loyal and disciplined member of the African National Congress, a political organization he joined in 1944 in the fight for freedom and justice. Mr. Mandela's other name, Rolihlahla, the name given to him by his father, Chief Henry, is a Xhosa name which literally means pulling the branch of a tree. But its colloquial meaning, more accurately, would be troublemaker. Now, looking at his entire life, one is tempted to think that Mr. Mandela seems to have lived by the letter and spirit of his name, considering the many troubles he caused successive apartheid governments in South Africa. Obviously, The troubles he caused for the apartheid regimes landed him in bigger troubles: banning orders, restrictions, periodic detentions and imprisonment, treason and sabotage charges, and finally, life imprisonment on Robben Island. A man known for his humility and generosity of spirit, Mandela would be the first to admit that he should not be singled out from the many thousands who, over decades, have struggled for freedom and justice in South Africa. But no doubt, he is perhaps the single most vital symbol not only of liberation from the tyranny of apartheid, but of a new way of life in South Africa. Mandela exemplified that resolute refusal to respond in kind to the racialism of the whites. Oliver Reginald Tambo, his longtime friend, partner, confidant, and comrade, has described him as passionate, fearless, impatient, sensitive. On 5 December 1956, Mandela was arrested along with other 156 comrades and charged with treason. After the marathon trial, all were acquitted. Mandela was re-arrested in 1962 on charges of inciting Africans to strike and with leaving the country without valid travel documents. He was sentenced to hard labor 5 years. Now, Joel Joffrey was Mandela's defense attorney during the famous Rivonia trial that started in October 1963. Mandela was brought from prison where he was serving the 5-year jail term to stand trial with the rest of those comrades who were arrested at Liliesfield, and he took the stand as accused number 1. During their first consultation with Joffrey in prison, the day before the trial opened on 10 October 1963, Joffrey described the sight of Mandela, who had already spent a year of his earlier 5-year prison sentence, in the following terms. After a year in jail, physically a very different Mandela from the man I'd met the year before, when his youthful vigor made him look much younger than 45. Very tall, heavily built, he had been an amateur boxer of some ability. Now, after living on a diet prescribed for African prisoners, he looked miserably underweight. He had withered. His face was hollow-cheeked, the skin a sickly yellowish color. But in spirit, he was undefeated. His manner was the same: friendly, easygoing, confident, and his laughter had not changed. Joffrey came to know him well in the months that followed. He said this about him: Mandela emerged quite naturally as the leader. He had all the attributes: a strong personality, ability, stature, and calm, tact, conviction. It was part of Nelson's strength that he never dictated. He would always discuss, argue with, and be guided by the opinion of his colleagues. When Mandela and his 7 comrades were sentenced to life imprisonment in June 1964, Chief Albert Luthuli, the Nobel Peace Laureate and President of the African National Congress, issued a statement on June 12, 1964, in which he recalled the contribution of Mandela and his comrades to the struggle for freedom. Chief Luthuli wrote, in part, "Over the long years, these leaders advocated a policy of racial cooperation, of goodwill, and of peaceful struggle that made the South African liberation movement one of the most ethical and responsible of our times. In the face of bitter racial persecution, they resolutely set themselves against racialism. In the face of continued provocation, they consistently chose the path of reason." Now, Michael Dingake was Mr. Mandela's prison mate on Robben Island from 1966 to 1981. He had a lot to say about Comrade Mandela, including the following: Comrade Nelson, among all the inmates, was the most tireless participant in political discussions. Nelson Mandela is an indefatigable activist for human rights. Madiba, as he is respectfully addressed using his slang name, is a man who lives for nothing else but the struggle of his people outside jail and inside jail. Nelson is a forceful debater, some say controversial and dogmatic. The opinion appears slanted when you get to know him better. Perhaps it is his direct, fiercely candid approach which depicts him in an unfavorable light with some contrary opinion holders. In an argument with someone with insubstantial facts, Nelson can be vicious by adopting a modified Socratic method. Those who have read the books, The Struggle is My Life and No Easy Walk to Freedom by Mandela, will have a good image of Mandela the man. Forthright in his condemnation of government oppression, unequivocal about the society he's striving for, and forceful in his pledge to fight for a better society. Dingake says further, whenever I have watched Madiba present his own or general complaints of inmates to the prison authorities, stressing every word and every syllable of every word he uttered, I would be reminded of Chief Lutuli's precept, let your courage rise with danger. Nelson was one prisoner who officers could not ignore, not because of his status, but because he would not let them do it. Comrade Mandela's attitude and conduct was that physically he was in prison, but psychologically he was free. Comrade Mandela is articulate, confident, factual, assertive, and persuasive. On 11 February 1990, after 27 years, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. He was fully involved in the negotiations process that culminated in 1994 in the first all-inclusive general election that ushered in the first ever democratically elected government in South Africa in 350 years, with Nelson Mandela as the state president under a constitution regarded by many as the most progressive in the world. Nelson Mandela has hundreds and hundreds of honors, awards, and other forms of recognition which have been bestowed upon him, too many to mention. They include the Jawaharlal Nehru Award for International Understanding, the UNESCO Peace Prize, the Africa Peace Award, the Gandhi King Award by the World Movement for Nonviolence, the International Gandhi Peace Prize, and the Nobel Peace Prize. Many streets, avenues, schools, cities, institutions, parks, buildings, centers, universities, scholarships, bridges across the world have been named after Mandela in honor and recognition of his contribution to the betterment of the face of humanity. But still, as President Mbeki says, the world has not the honors at its disposal to fully salute his work. Mr. Mandela is a patron of many worthy causes in the various fields of sport, education, health, human development, environmental protection, conservation, and so on, all aimed at addressing the needs of those less fortunate and vulnerable. President Mbeki has described Mandela as an icon of his age. And about Mandela and his generation of leaders, President Mbeki has said, throughout their lives, they struggled against everything that was ugly, mean, brutish, and degrading of the dignity of all human beings. And because they did, being prepared to pay the supreme price to uphold good over evil, they planted a legacy among our people which drives all of us constantly to return to the same starting point and say, I am my brother's keeper. I am my sister's keeper. In 1999, at the end of his once-off one-term presidency, Mr. Mandela said the following in his speech at a farewell banquet in his honor: "For you do make me feel at home, as part of an international community of men and women who have chosen the world as the theater of their operations in pursuit of justice, and as an ordinary citizen of a nation that has won the world's admiration, not by prowess in war, but by the dedication of its people of every background, and to celebrate their humanity." And referring to his looming retirement from active politics, and I think in words that capture the theme of this year's conclave, Mr. Mandela said, "It is no easy thing to rest while millions still bear the burden of poverty and insecurity. But my days will be filled with contentment to the extent that hands are joined across the social divides and national boundaries, between continents and over oceans, to give effect to that common humanity in whose name we have together made the long walk to where we are today." Nelson Mandela is a husband, a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, uncle, brother, cousin, a leader, a patriot, a statesman, isitwalandwe, siaparangwe, a human being of flesh and blood with a heart the size of the universe. And as we in South Africa would say, "Hey, uMandela ngumntu ke lowo," a living symbol of compassion, love, tolerance, forbearance, peace, forgiveness. However, having said all this, I think the totality of who Madiba is and what he lives and stands for can be summarized in no better words than his own. The words he uttered in court in 1964 when he faced the real possibility of a death sentence, and repeated in 1990 on the steps of Cape Town City Hall after his release, the same words that were quoted earlier by Raj. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my greatest privilege and honor to kindly invite the moderator of this session to play the pre-recorded message from Mr. Nelson Rolihlahla Madiba Viva Mandela to India Today Conclave 2006. And I thank you very much for your kind attention.
It is often said that we live in a global village, that you in Delhi can hear me speak from Johannesburg proves how true that is in a literal sense. The 20th century had seen unbelievable technological and scientific progress. And the world is in many respects a much better place than it was 100 years ago. And there is much to be grateful for. The last century had also proved in your country and mine and elsewhere across the globe that the resistance to injustice and the fight for freedom is an instinctive human response as much as it is a political act. The 20th century witnessed the end of colonization and the birth of numerous young nations. The attainment of national political freedom was, however, not the end of the struggle. I have said in the past that after climbing a great hill, one only finds there are many more hills to climb. In every corner of our world today, mankind continues to struggle, often against oppressors of another kind that is proving as formidable and persistent. Poverty, hunger, disease, and debt cannot be fought with weapons. They can only be truly challenged by the human will. It worries me that our world is becoming a global village only for the exchange of goods and information, not as a place of shelter, livelihood, security, and dignity for all who live in it. I know what a real village is like because I grew up in one. The divide between the world's rich and poor is not merely the result of economic consequences or market forces. It is also the result of closed hearts and narrow minds. Prosperity without an equitable distribution of resources is neither just nor sustainable in the long run. Progress without social justice is not real human progress. The dilemma of India, which will be explored in the India Today Conclave this year, is in fact the dilemma of our entire planet. Our world is full of riches, but the poor are everywhere. We live in an age of unprecedented scientific and technological advancement, but we cannot ensure the delivery of basic health care to most of our population. We do not yet know the consequences of such a market imbalance, but I do know that when burdened by inequality, our entire humanity is flawed. It is our duty, the duty of the world's leaders of nations and corporations, to think and act as citizens of the one home we have, the global village we live in. I leave you with the words of Mohandas Gandhi, who had this advice for leaders of all kinds. I quote, "Whenever you are in doubt, apply the following test. Recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man you may have seen, and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him. Will it restore him to control over his own life and destiny?" Unquote. If the 20th century was a century of national freedom, the century we live in today must be a century for creating a better life for all.